Well, speaking of IPOs, this is the perfect setup. And a possible resurgence in the private markets. Let's bring in Erik Hirsch, Hamilton Lane co-CEO. Hamilton Lane is an alternative investment firm with nearly $1 trillion in assets under management. Erik, it's great to have you on, and that's exactly where I want to start with you. What is it going to take to see this IPO market actually pick up some activity here, especially given the fact that the Fed is starting to cut, and you do have credit conditions that are pretty inviting?
Morgan, great to be back. I think we're starting to see it now. This week, I expect to see at least 6 in registration. You're starting to see that market open up. Frankly, that market needs to open up. The public markets need more inventory. You've basically seen a flat or declining number of public companies over the last 10, 15 years. That's a problem for the public markets. The investors need more choice. Having kind of this just dominated by a handful of sort of technology, big cap companies, I think is not healthy for the public market. So glad to see them opening back up and glad to see the private markets sort of returning some assets back to the public markets.
We are starting to see the lines blur increasingly between public and private markets. And what I mean by that is the fact that more and more access to high net worth individuals, more and more access or attempts at access for retail investors to the private market as well. How much does that contribute to some of these dynamics? And what does it mean in terms of opportunities for individual investors?
Morgan, I think this is great for the individual investor. They have essentially been shut out of the private markets for the last several decades. And if you look at what's been the big driver of public pension fund performance, for example, where some number of American savers are deriving their retirement savings, the big driver of performance for the pension funds has been the private markets. And yet the non-pensioner has been really not able to participate in any way. So that is changing. New laws, new structures, more availability of product. I think all that's a good thing. Now, that's not to say that all of these are going to work out great, but I think the fact that the choice is there, I think, is a real positive. It is also going to result in a lot more capital coming into the private markets. And I think, like all things, that's going to be both good and bad, and people will have to navigate carefully.
So, when is tokenization's big moment, you think, Erik? And are you counting that among the risks? We saw the volatility around crypto. People have strong feelings about it. I don't know if it'd be a good or a bad thing for tokenization to get caught up in that same fervor.
I see tokenization as simply a technology, a means to an end. It is simply an easier, better, faster, cheaper way for investors to transact. It is not a crypto play. It's not a currency play. Think of it as sort of the move of today in the private markets, we're all taking our time to handwrite checks. Tokenization is Apple Pay, and that is a much better development for both sides of the equation. So good for the fund managers, good for the investors. And our view is that as you continue to see more retail capital coming into the private markets, they're not going to want to be writing checks. They're going to want to using a much more simplistic way of transacting, and we see tokens as the way to do that.
Give us, if you will, your thesis briefly on infrastructure and why that's still such an important area for investors to be focused on.
If anyone just gets in their car and drives a half an hour tonight on their way home, you're going to see roads that need repair, bridges that need to be expanded. And that's the traditional infrastructure. Now add to that the fact that as a country, we are in dire need of some big energy overhauling, systems at capacity, rolling brownouts, et cetera. And then add to that what's happening on sort of the need for data centers, also infrastructure. You put all of that together, that is a huge amount of capital that's going to be required to take this country to the next level. Some of that's going to come from the government, yes, but a lot of that is going to require private partnership, and that's going to be private infrastructure.